Hello, Mike Beckel here, once again coming to you from my home office in Kentucky. As most of you know by now, I'm the Midwest I&M Regional Sales Manager for Cadwell Industries, and I'd like to welcome you to Session 3 of our Education and Isolation series, Everything You Need to Know About Cascade Surgical Studio. Today's session is titled Surgical Studio Masterclass. I gave this session originally on Wednesday, April 29th, 2020, and it was recorded with many great questions, and thanks everyone for attending. We had some technical difficulties with the audio from that recording. So today I'm re-recording the session, trying to cover all the same topics again. I hope you find it useful and you get something out of this session. With that, we'll move forward. Education and Isolation, everything you need to know about Cascade Surgical Studio. Session 3, Surgical Studio Master Class.
First, I would like to cover the tool we'll be using or did use during this. This is the GoToWebinar tool that you see on screen at this time. Most importantly, as this is not an actual live webinar, hopefully these handouts will be available for you to download and take a peek at as we move through this webinar. These are the handouts. The first one is the overview of the whole education and isolation series. Has been done in 3 sessions, beginning 2.5 weeks ago with session 1. This is recorded and available to be viewed, as is session 2 from a week and a half ago. And today we are re-recording session 3, Surgical Studio Masterclass, down here at the bottom. This is a more detailed view of the outline we'll be covering today under Surgical Studio Masterclass. We will be discussing administration of records, patients, sites, case fields, user groups and roles. We'll be doing a CADX overview. And we'll finish up with CADLink usage and advantages. Right now, I've brought up my Cascade Surgical Studio application, and we were working today with the menu on the left-hand side. Beginning at, we pretty much covered the case section during session 1. Templates were mostly done with session 2, and today we'll be doing the masterclass items here from administration on down. Starting with administration of records. So the first thing I'd like to clarify is exactly what is a record. In Cascade Classic, when you recorded data, you basically had one file when it was done, surgical monitoring data file, .smd file, and everything was right in that location, or right within that file. With Surgical Studio, there is more data that's collected, and if we go to review here, I'll show you the items that are included in an actual record. So this is a case I did earlier today, just a demonstration case. And if I select that, over here on the right, I've created some reports that now belong to that patient. So those are actually part of the record, as well as if I would hit view the chat log will be displayed here, and those are part of the record. So the record is basically the patient demographics, all of the data that's collected, the chat logs, and any reports that are created, or any other files that you may like to associate with this particular record. So once you have a record, what can you do with it? Well, if you have CADLink, which we'll be discussing later, you can take that record and you'll be able to archive it and store it. Archiving records. Auto archive is used when you do have a CAD-link server. You can enable that to automatically take place under a number of selected criteria, including archive records that haven't been accessed in a specific number of days. So if you check that and say, gosh, nobody's looked at this in 14 days, archive it. Archive records, the other option might be archive records that have been reviewed. Once a physician looks at them and does a report and checks them off as being reviewed, go ahead and archive them. So what does archiving do? Well, it takes them out of this list under review. So if I were to actually archive patient records, archive records, check that, choose archive. It would like a location where to archive it. In this case, I'm going to, normally you'd have this with Surgical Studio with CAD-link in a external drive of someplace. I've got a USB drive connected to my computer, so I'm going to select that folder, tell it to archive it. And it's finished successfully. And now when I go up here to review, those patients aren't there, but I can easily get them back. Say if somebody calls you 2 years down the road, you can, and wants particular information, you can restore the records and you will find your patient in here and select it and then restore it, and it will bring it back into your local database for you to be able to look at, generate a report, whatever you'd like to do with that data. And now if I choose review, my patient is back. Now, many of you also will want to take your data. In Classic, it was the SMD files, and you might want to move them to another provider that also stores all this data for you. Basically, get them off your machine so they're in another location. If you're not using CAD-link, you would use the export records function. So you would choose export records. You would pick a location for that to be exported to. Well, in this case, first we're going to choose the record we want to export. There are a couple of selections at the bottom that you can anonymize records, or anonymize records, excuse me, and exclude associated files like the reports and chat logs. You may do this if you had as like a certain file you wanted to send to Cadwell or somebody else for information and not for them to review, but not include any protected health information, patient name, et cetera, et cetera. But in this case, if you were uploading it to another provider, you might check that, choose export, and the location you'd like to export it to. In this case, give this a new name. And here you'd probably want to actually put down your actual patient name, and I'm going to export that to my D drive here. Choose export. And once it's in this other location, you then can move that to your specific provider or wherever you choose to store your patient data off your system. And still exporting, nearing the end here. Okay, we're finished with that. And then of course, if you ever needed to bring them back, you would go to records once again. In this case, you would import records and you would browse to this location, and this selection would be USB drive D. Choose the patient you'd like to import and it will import. Now this patient already exists, so this will not import at this time. So I'm just going to cancel that function. Now, as we move through that, deleting records, that would be the other selection we may have here. Once, if you have confirmed you've moved these to your other location for permanent storage, at that point you could select the patients you'd like to delete. And you can select multiple ones and then delete them, and they will be removed from your machine. Unlock, occasionally a record gets in a state that Cascade Surgical Studio feels like it's locked, and it will be displayed here, and you just choose it and unlock it. And then you'll be able to perform the function of that record that you would like to perform. Okay, next under administration is patients. Well, patients are just the very basic information. If I go up here to new, under patient information, we've got last name, first name, middle initial, sex, birth date, age, ID. So under patients, we have those same fields: last name, first name, middle initial, date of birth, sex, patient ID. Next, under administration is sites. Sites are the names of the recording sites or stimulation sites, or all the locations on a patient that you may attach a lead of some sort. And we have a whole very extensive list of default sites that are just part of the Cascade Surgical Studio application. So there is just about everything. There are sites in here I'm not familiar with, and just about every site that I can think of that I've ever needed. Now, default sites cannot be deleted. They can be edited. You can add things to them if you like and save those changes, and then they'll become customized, of course. But you can add custom sites anytime you'd like. So for instance, the right medial gastroc is already in this list. I can tell you that because if I started searching at the top for gastroc, we've got left gastrocnemius here. Well, I just wanted to create one as an example of a shorter custom label. So I did that by, first let's remove one here. We'll get rid of this left MG. So yes, I want to remove that. If I would like to add a new one, I create new, I select new, and over here under name, I will give it a new name. We'll do left MG. Now, what aliases or what else might somebody call this? Well, they might call it a gastroc or a MG, gastrocnemius, any number of names that you think somebody may type in and you'd like this selection or this name to appear. Now, region, very important for Surgical Studio. This particular location is going to be in the leg. Well, why is this important? Well, you may recall under session 2 when we were creating procedure setups that you could create entire modes that are one compact unit with all the settings in there. Well, if you were to add, say, a right median SSEP to a new procedure setup, Surgical Studio will place the electrodes that are in that mode in the proper pods where other cortical leads or leg leads or any of those things are located, provided it knows the region of the body that they're placed in. So putting region in is very helpful for Surgical Studio. Side, this is the left side, of course. And is it associated with one on the contralateral side? Well, as a matter of fact, yes, right medial gastroc. And active reference pair, well, actually it is an active reference pair. We'll have a positive left medial gastroc and a negative left medial gastroc, or an active in reference would be more accurate. And if we check that box, it automatically knows that we only have to put one of those in and it will reference it to the other electrode automatically. So very helpful, very saves a lot of time. So I'm going to save those changes, and we now have a left gastroc on here. So those sites are now available to us to use within any procedure that we might set up. So just I want to reiterate that selected site information is very useful. And one caveat that I've run into a time or two is when you're selecting these, let's say you were going to put in a C4. Well, be sure when you pick the C4 that you're picking the scalp lead and not the C4 from the spot, the neck or the spine, because C4 could also be a level in the spine or a nerve root. And it does confuse Surgical Studio if you're trying to place a scalp lead and reference it to a trunk lead. Not that it can't be done, but if you try and do certain functions like EEG analysis, it will not be able to perform it because that makes no sense to the application. Okay, we'll clear that out of sight. Next, case fields. What are case fields? Let's go back up to cases and new. And case fields are this information that comes under case information. So we go down to case fields under administration. We can see these are the default fields that are listed when you first open up Cascade Surgical Studio. The boxes off here to the right are the checked ones, are the ones that will be displayed when we are looking here. Now, case fields can be very useful if there's specific information that you really would like to require everybody enter before they save that record for forever. So let's say in your institution, you absolutely have to have a medical record number. So we will type in MR number sign, and the field length is either a single line or multi-line. Well, a medical record number is going to be one line. Narrative means you can attach a predefined narrative. This might be something you would create to generate some type of report. But in this case, we're not going to add any narrative to this. We'll just be typing in a medical record number. And if we make it required, save the changes. Now you're going to see it over here. We're not going to be able to uncheck it. It's going to be a required field. And now when we go up here to new, you will see medical record number here. Now you still can start the case without entering that, but you cannot leave the case until a medical record is entered. If you do enter it at the beginning, no problem, it'll just close the case. But the only thing required to start the case is the patient last and first name. But if you do want to put that in, it will alert you if you've not entered it before you close the case. It will be a required field from this point forward. So I'm actually going to remove that in this case. So I'm just going to delete it. And of course, you do have the option of reordering these if you would like the diagnosis first. We can choose reorder, and we're going to move that up using this tool here. And now it's up here, and diagnosis is ahead of these items. So that's how you change how the items are displayed. The big boxes are multi-line. The smaller boxes are single line. Reorder, diagnosis, move that back down. Click OK. And now, of course, we've got diagnosis and surgical description below these items. Next, I'm going to skip a little bit ahead of the outline here. Next would be user management, but we're going to go down to settings and talk about general settings first. So at the top are some very basic general settings. The mains frequency you'd expect to see within your institution. Of course, 50 Hertz is going to be international more than US, which is our electricity is at 60 Hertz. You can actually have Surgical Studio start right up when you launch your computer. If you choose, that would be chosen there. Language preference, of course, English and font size, in this case, large. And of course, you can change that to whatever suits your needs based on your display. Site-wide settings pertain to everything connected to your system. Either the system setup is on this one machine. Site-wide settings would mean if you have multiple systems all connected through CAD-Link, again, we'll be coming up on the CAD-Link description here, but that does synchronize all your devices together. So if your administrator were to say, boy, we don't want to save our chat log in our institution, we'll just uncheck that. Every device that works through CAD-Link would no longer have the chat log saved. And likewise, maybe you don't want to know when people or have it logged that reviewers are connected. I'm not sure why that would be, but some folks might not want that. Chat, I see both ways. Many people want it, many people don't. No problem either way. Automatically capture event log screenshots. When you enter an event at this time, a screenshot is automatically captured. Doesn't mean you have to print it or do anything else with it. It's just automatically done. But for those people who might not want to automatically capture them, you would turn them off. Again, I'm not really, other than maybe saving a small bit of data, data space, don't really see the advantage, but it is an option. Display case upgrade warning, that has to do with when an older version of Cascade Surgical Studio is used to record data, and then you're now using a newer version, a warning will come up and say, hey, we need to upgrade this or update this case to your newer version. Are you sure you want to do that? And yes, you would want to do that in 99.9% of the cases. So that's just whether you want the warning to show up or not. Reporting color scheme has to do with how the reports look when they're generated. Customize application title bar. You can choose that, and these are the options that appear across the title bar, the top part of your screen up here. So in certain instances, because of HIPAA and PHI and those kinds of things, some folks may not want to display the patient name or any of this other information here, or you may want to display other bits of information. Who's the surgeon? So any of that information would be displayed on this title bar up here. And again, site-wide, all of the devices that are connected via CAD-Link. And set default event priority. So as you enter events, what priority would you like them to be? So you select this and you can choose whatever you deem the importance of that would be. Now, we'll go back up here to user management. And I'd like to actually start with user roles. And it's asking me if I want to save the changes to general settings. And in this case, I'm just going to select no. I'm not going to make any changes there. Okay, user roles. So the default user roles that will arrive when you first install Surgical Studio are going to be administrator, physician, and tech. So how are those, what do those things mean? Well, administrator, they can do all of these items that are checked here on the left-hand side. And what are these items? Well, accessibility. I'm not going to go through every one. You can read these at your leisure, but display all records. User can display all records regardless of user group assignments. Display my group's records. User can display any records within their user group, et cetera, et cetera. So an administrator can do everything, of course. Now a tech, they may not be able to display all records. They may only be able to display, or at least in your institution, you only want them to display the records that are part of the tech group or whatever group you might assign. We'll talk about groups here shortly. You would like the techs to be able to manage body sites, which means they can come over here to sites and add new ones and subtract them and delete them and do anything else that you would like them to do. Manage CADX scripts. We'll talk about those a little bit when we get to the CADX, but manage case fields. We talked about what they are. So in this case, nope, I don't want them to be able to add those. I want just the administrators to do that. And physicians, they might be very limited. You don't want them managing any cases. You don't want them running any cases, but they can review records. Maybe they can start procedures, maybe not. Some places physicians are very adept at it and others wouldn't know the first thing about running a case, so you may not want them to start procedures. Exporting records, importing records, unlocking records, all depends on what you feel the needs of your physicians should be in your site. Make those changes, click save. Now I added a chief tech. So my chief tech basically can do everything except maybe they're not to display all records. Totally up to you. One of the major uses that I find with this is you might have different levels of tech. Some of your newer techs you might add. Let's just rename this one Tech 1. And Tech 1s, they're not quite up to managing body sites and scripts yet. You'd rather them come and ask a Tech 2 for that. You don't really want them managing input setups or modes or patients or procedure setups or report templates. Definitely not site-wide settings, definitely not system settings. So they can review records and start procedures and export records if needed. Now, so they'll be able to run procedures, do everything they need to during a procedure, but just not make any permanent changes to those procedures that would then be reflected on everybody else's machine. So that would be manage procedure templates. So in this case, I'm going to save those changes. So Tech 1, anybody assigned as a Tech 1 can pretty much record any procedures and do what they need to record data. Let's make a new one, and this one will be a Tech 2. And Tech 2s are a little bit more advanced, so we're going to give them accessibility to some records, and they can do body sites, and they can manage modes and manage patients and procedure templates and report templates, and probably not site-wide settings. That probably ought to be the manager or the chief tech. And same with system settings and users. We don't want them doing that. Preserving restore, yeah, we'll teach them how to do that. And of course, they can review and start procedures, and they can archive records and delete them and export them and unlock them. So now we've got a couple of different levels of techs. So that's how we can create roles for different people and sort of manage the types of things that they're capable of doing within Surgical Studio. Now let's go over to users and let's add some users. So you'll have one user when you first install Surgical Studio, and that's the admin. And from there, an administrator would create more users. So I've added myself, and I've added another administrator named George Washington. So how do we add them? We come down here and we new, and we can give this person a name. Let's do Dr. Berger. So default username H Berger. Of course, that could be anything you'd like it to be. We don't want Dr. Berger to be an administrator. He's a physician, so we're going to give him a physician role. He's not in any groups. We're not using CAD schedule. That's a whole nother another thing we'd talk about. But we would need to assign him a password or ask him to create a password. So in this case, I'm just going to assign one. And got to repeat it, of course. If you are using like Active Directory in a hospital or some scenario like that, you can't associate this with that account. And there's many advantages to that. All right, changes. And let's see if we can get them to match here. Passwords, that is. There we go. Okay, so we've added Dr. Berger as a new user. User groups. This is where you can basically assign, let's say you have two different groups of physicians and you want the West Side group has a couple of doctors in it, and they come and they read studies or oversee you, and in that group is Dr. Berger and Dr. Washington. And then you have another group, and they're the East Side doctors. And those doctors, of course, they're a much longer list, are these folks here. So now, within these groups, you can say this user is part of the user group, is part of the East doctors. So he'll only be able to see the records from, or the patients associated with that group. So in other words, you're able to take a group and narrow down the abilities that group that has visibility to. Okay, so we've covered all the topics under administration and user management and settings at this point. Now, I would like to talk some about the CADX and give you a little overview of what CADX is all about and why we think it's such a great tool. So the Surgical Studio CADX Simulator is a software-only solution designed to solve a common problem, which is training for intraoperative neuromonitoring. I'm actually running CADX right now, so you can see CADX Simulator. So if I start a new patient and begin running, okay, we're launched. We can start our procedure here. Cadx generates waveforms that you'd expect to see in the locations you'd expect to see them. So we've got two cortical leads here for this left upper SSEP, subcortical and NURBS point. And let's just store that data. If we're running EMG, we can generate EMG that would look like like actual bursts of EMG. If we were to run a train of 4, we can get data that actually looks like a train of 4. We'll just set a baseline there. And we'll run another one. So we've got 404. If we're to run an MEP, let's go to the left MEP here. As I dial this up and I stimulate, we get my byte block warning, of course. But no responses, but I'm seeing some stim artifact there, very much like I'd expect to see. Still nothing at 110. Let's drive it up a little bit, starting to get something there in the left hand. Go up a little higher. Oh, there we go. Let's go a little more. 300 volts. Okay. Set a baseline there. Right click, set a baseline. And we'll come over to the right MEP. And rather than go up slow, I'm going to bring it up just to save time and generate one quickly here. And right click, set baseline. Now, Cadx will allow us, let's back to these SSEPs here. This icon, Cadx control panel, you select that, I can change any number of parameters that can be changed on a patient that might happen in the operating room. And in a sense, some things that you don't get to see that often or that are hard to describe or show to people unless you have this ability. So let's start with we'll do a couple real quick examples. Technical setup. Let's go to input mapping. So Cadx does use our IOMax hardware. So there is a little bit of getting used to with this if you're used to using a Pro or an Elite or one of our other systems. But the basic way of looking at this is this cortical module is like one pod, usually by the head, but it could be anywhere. And you've got electrode 1 through electrode 13. And then we have a couple more sites down here that are called fixed pairs, but one active, one reference, two active, two reference. And these active reference pairs are usually used for EMG. But view these like module 1 and limb module 2 sort of like pod C and pod D. So in pod C, we've got a left hand active to a left hand reference, left fastest active to left fastest reference, 3A is left tib anterior, 3R reference, left tibialis anterior, etc. Now, in using Cadx, the green indicates that the electrodes that are selected are the proper electrodes for that location. In other words, everything is programmed the way it's supposed to be and plugged in the way it's supposed to be. But a very common one that, like, I think everybody's done over the years is maybe on outputs. Let's say you inadvertently swapped your uppers and lowers. So in limb module 1, which is actually also a 5-output stimulator for electrode pair 1, 2, 3, 4, and 5. In output pair 1, we have the left median nerve of the wrist. Well, let's swap that. Let's make this the left tibial nerve at the ankle. Now, it's indicating red that we're supposed to be plugging the median in there, but we've plugged in the incorrect one. So what does that look? Well, pretty quickly here on our SSEPs, we're going to get some funky data. Let's go ahead and store these last ones and see how they look here. So now I'm not seeing Herb's point. I'm seeing a very long delayed subcortical, and then some waveforms out here further out that are look to be like cortical SSEPs. And then here for our lower, we're now getting very quick signals I would not expect to see from a lower extremity. So the idea is you can present this to somebody and see if they can figure out what the issue is and how would they troubleshoot that and help them work through what would cause a scenario like this. Now, the question came up during the regular webinar. I'm going to hit this little button here to reset this. Can this be hidden from the person you're testing? And in fact, it can be. You can have a trainer student scenario or a teacher and an assessee scenario, and you can hide this so you can make changes to it. And then there's actually an assessment mode that will allow you to check off whether these various scenarios were adequately or accurately identified by the person you're assessing. Now, I'm sure the question is, how do I do that? So let me show you the best way to get this information. I'll take you to our website. I would like you to start with, or the easiest thing to do is remember to go to cadwell.com and then Cadwell support. Now, as you're watching this webinar, most people have already signed up for our free Premier support, but if you haven't, you will need to in order to access this location. But under downloads, we're offering the free CADX simulator. So it is free for a minimum of 6 months. So I'd like you to use this time to learn about Surgical Studio. It's a great tool for teaching that or for instructing others. With this free CADX On-M simulator, we have a bunch of wonderful videos that another one of our field applications and support specialists put together, Cindy Frankie. And any of these videos will give you great insight and great education on how this is used. So here's the trainer-trainee scenario that you can use to then view and get an understanding of how to create the scenarios that you would use to assess somebody else. CADX scripts, I'll briefly talk about those, and Cindy does a great job of explaining those, but I'm going to take you back to our Surgical Studio application here. And CADX scripts allow you as an educator or an assessor to run through a scenario or a group of scenarios that can happen one right after the other. So you don't have to sit here and make all these adjustments. You make adjustments, you save them as scripts, and then you run them. So this was a demonstration script, but if we wanted to do an assessment of somebody, here it says a step interval, and Cindy explains this very well, how it will do one step for a certain length of time. In this case, if we select inhalation agent, back to demonstration. There we go. I think I need to have another instance of the application running in order for me to do the assessment method. So the inhalation age now going up, and in a short while, I would expect the Let's set some baselines here so we can see the changes. I would start to expect to see some reduction in cortical amplitudes. And it does take a little time, just like in the real world. You can speed it up using the timers and those kind of things, but let's go ahead and save that data. And I'm beginning to see a little smaller corticals here as that occurs. Now we could turn that script off. Let's put on some cautery, and of course we're going to get some cautery in the EMG down there. You'll see that everything, all the E's here for electrosurgical unit. So scripts are predefined things that you can create to run through assessments very quickly, one right after the other. Okay, I'll close scripts. And once again, free, go to our website, our support site, get the information, look at the training. I think you'll find those items to be very useful. Okay, next on our outline, CADlink. I'm going to close this case here and do a little discussion of CADlink. So what is CADlink? Well, CADlink is Cadwell's clinical information and management platform. And what that means is it usually lives on a server, and it's apart from the acquisition device that you work with day to day in the operating room. And what this does for us is as we're recording data, it is actually connected to CADlink, and we know this because in our system tray, see if I can get it up here. We have a little icon, the green check on it. If it's green, it says CADlink client is online and syncing with the server. So as we're recording data, all this data is being synchronized with the server. Well, how is that helpful? Well, in a number of ways. First of all, it gets it off your device automatically, so you don't have to copy and move it to a server or copy it to another location, unless you're using an offsite provider that you still may have to export it at that point. But if you're not using that external provider, all this data can be archived in something that on a server that you can manage. Now, if a case is being run, and let's see if I can run one here on my other machine. I'm now starting up a case on a different machine here. So at this point, I'm going to function as the reviewer or a remote physician. And I've started a case on my other machine here. And if I choose remote monitor, this panel will show me all of the different cases that are currently running. And of course, you could have multiple cases going on. And I don't need to know the IP address. I just need to select it, double click on it, and get started. So it's very helpful if you do have a lot of cases going and you need a physician to very easily be able to access those cases. Not only can he see to remote monitor these, but he could review his cases. He can add more to them by clicking the plus sign at the bottom down here, and you could review another case, or in this case, he could review one that was done earlier. So he could select that and hit review. Now, what else can it do? Well, it securely encrypts the data communication and storage. So the streaming data is automatically saved to the CadLink server. The data is collected offline and is automatically moved when the client, your system, reconnects to the CadLink network. Everything is HIPAA compliant, and it does audit logging. Now that I've launched this, I just want to show you, I can click on the case that I'm remotely looking at down here. Let's turn on some free running EMG so you'll get that. So this is a live case. This is a case to review. It could be more live cases. You just hit the plus sign and you can move between them. And these can be floated and moved to different locations. So if you have multiple monitors, you then could move this one to another site. In this case, I'm going to drop it right back in the center here, which means it's going to be tabbed at the bottom again, and I can. So you would float them if you had multiple monitors and wanted these on different devices. Back to CadLink advantages, HIPAA compliant audit logging, which is very important for most IT departments these days. Who's been using the system and what have they been doing? It can be integrated with your electronic medical records via an HL7 interface. There's advanced data management that will automatically synchronize offline data. So you don't have to be on the CadLink when you're recording. So if you weren't able to connect for some reason, it doesn't stop you in any way from recording your information. You gather the data. The next time you are plugged in and synchronize, it will automatically do that for you. Nothing to worry about there. User management. As we discussed, if you make these changes and let's say you've got 20 people that you need to manage, you can add all those people to your user list. And when they're added, CadLink would then synchronize across all of your systems, that all those different clients that would connect to this, all of those users and what they're allowed to do. So you don't have to go around from device to device and synchronize that. And that's true of procedure setups. So you might have a single person, a chief tech, or a group of techs who create your settings here. And once they're done here, no exporting, importing, none of that. That can all be managed here. And when the other devices connect to CadLink, they will automatically be updated with your new settings. Very convenient for that. Okay, that brings us to the end of our outline. With that, I would like to bring it to a close. We have reached the hour time mark, so I would like to thank you for participating in this. We do appreciate everybody joining us for our Education in Isolation series of webinars, and hope everybody finds this to have been a useful series and can take away some of the great things that Cascade Surgical Studio offers. We sure do appreciate you as customers, and if there's anything we can do to help you with Cascade Surgical Studio, please reach out to us, and please respond with any feedback or anything else we can do to help you use your systems. Thank you and take care.